For all that celebrations are magnificent, at the heart of the pageantry is a simple message: service. My father's first words on entering Westminster Abbey yesterday were a pledge of service. It was a pledge to continue to serve.
What happens when a quiet family gathering turns into the kind of royal mess no one saw coming? When someone's careless words spark a fire that even the palace can't put out? Behind the polished smiles and perfect photos, the royal family just went through something that shook them to the core. It started with one comment, one sharp remark aimed at Princess Anne, and before anyone could stop it, Prince William stepped in with fury nobody expected. The walls of Windsor Castle witnessed something raw, something real, something that proves even royals can't escape family drama. Stay with us as we uncover exactly what happened that night and why this scandal is far from over. The remark that started it all. Royal events are supposed to be smooth, champagne flowing, polite chatter, everyone playing their part perfectly. That's the image the palace works hard to maintain. But sometimes, even the most carefully planned gathering can fall apart with just a few words. And that's exactly what happened at Windsor Castle during what should have been a simple celebration. Princess Anne had just reached a massive milestone, her 20th official engagement. Think about that number for a second. 20,000 times she showed up, did her duty, represented the crown. No drama, no complaints, just solid, steady work that rarely made headlines, but kept the monarchy running. The event was meant to honor her for that. Close family, trusted guests, and plenty of pride in the room. Anne isn't like other royals. She doesn't chase attention or crave the spotlight. She just works. Tied to over 300 charities, she logs more appearances than almost anyone else in the family.
The Princess Royal, Princess Anne, is so refreshing. She is straight talking. She is no nonsense, no fuss. She gets on with it. She is the hardest working royal last year and for many, many years.
While others get caught up in scandals or personal issues, Anne stays focused. That's why people respect her. That's why William has always looked up to her. To him, she represents everything the crown should be: strong, reliable, real. But that night, someone decided to take a shot at her. Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter. A woman who's never worn a royal title, never taken on official duties, and mostly stays far away from palace life. She works as an art curator, raises her kids, and keeps a low profile. Most people barely know her name. But because her mother married King Charles, she's tied to the royal world whether she likes it or not. Laura was at the event because of Camilla. She wouldn't have been there otherwise. And while mingling with guests, she dropped a comment that hit harder than she probably realized. Witnesses said she suggested that Anne's old-school approach to royal duties felt outdated, that younger royals like William and Kate were bringing fresh energy, that maybe Anne's way of doing things didn't fit modern Britain anymore. It came out casually, almost like a throwaway line. But the impact was instant. People nearby froze. Eyes went wide. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Because criticizing Princess Anne at her own celebration, that's bold, that's risky. And coming from Camilla's daughter, it was like throwing gasoline on a fire nobody knew was burning. Anne herself was standing close enough to hear it. She didn't explode. She didn't make a scene. That's not her style. But those who know her saw the shift. A tightening in her jaw, a hardness in her eyes. She's faced criticism before. Spent her whole life being compared to her brothers, questioned about her choices, pushed aside by the press. But hearing this from someone inside the family at her own event stung in a way that was hard to hide. William caught every word, and his reaction was immediate. The prince is known for staying calm in public, for keeping his emotions in check. But when it comes to people he loves, that control has limits. And Princess Anne is one of those people. He's admired her since he was a kid, watched her compete in horse riding events with fearless confidence, leaned on her example when royal life felt too heavy. To him, She's the backbone of the family. So when Laura insulted her, William didn't just brush it off. His fists clenched. His stare turned ice cold. He stepped toward Laura with a look that made everyone around him nervous. The room felt it instantly. That shift in energy, that charge in the air. Something big was about to happen, and no amount of champagne or polite smiles could cover it up. The tension. Nobody could ignore. The moment was supposed to be a proud one for Anne. She had worked hard, dedicated her time to causes she deeply cared about, and now she was being recognized in front of an audience that respected her. But instead of a warm celebration, the atmosphere turned uneasy. It happened quickly, and everyone in the room felt it. William's reaction wasn't explosive or loud, but it was sharp enough that no one could miss it. His expression, his silence, his body language, they carried more weight than raised voices ever could. The cause of his anger was no mystery. Laura's comment had crossed a line. It wasn't casual, and it wasn't harmless. It carried a sting of disrespect that William was not willing to overlook. Anne, sensing the discomfort, did what she always does best. She stepped in to calm the waters, shifting the conversation toward safer ground. She spoke about her charity work, thanked people for attending, and smiled in a way that tried to patch over the crack. But no matter how smoothly she spoke, the damage had already been done. The tension was thick, lingering in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Even those who hadn't caught the exact words could sense that something serious had just happened. William made his stance clear without uttering a single word. He stayed close to Anne, his aunt, as though guarding her from further insult. He avoided Laura, refusing even the smallest gestures of politeness. No conversation, no acknowledgement. His message was plain. What she did was unacceptable, and he was not about to simply forget it. Camilla, ever observant, caught the shift immediately. She saw her daughter's discomfort, saw William's cold stare, and knew the situation had spiraled. For her, this was personal. She had always worked hard to keep Laura and Tom outside the harsh spotlight of royal drama. They had no titles, no official roles, no duties that tied them to the crown. That was deliberate. Camilla wanted them to live freely, away from the burdens William and Harry carried. And yet, here they were, dragged into royal conflict because of a single remark. The rest of the evening never recovered. Guests forced polite smiles, but the undercurrent of awkwardness ran strong. Staff quietly maneuvered, shifting seating, redirecting conversations, managing the fallout in real time. By the end of the night, nobody left with clarity. Would William let it pass? Would Laura apologize? Would Camilla shield her daughter further? One thing was certain, the story wasn't finished. This was only the beginning. William refuses to back down. The next morning, William asked for a private meeting with Anne. He'd spent hours replaying the night in his head. Every word, every look, every moment of disrespect, and he couldn't shake it. For William, this wasn't just about defending his aunt. It was about defending what the monarchy stands for: duty, service, respect. Anne wasn't surprised when William showed up. She knew him well enough to expect this. They met in her sitting room at Gatcombe Park, away from palace staff and prying eyes. Anne stayed calm, listening quietly while William's frustration poured out. He couldn't understand how Laura, who only had access to royal events because of her mother, could disrespect someone who had worked harder than almost anyone in the family. Anne gave a small shrug. "You get used to it, William," she said simply. "People always think they know how this job should be done." For her, Laura's comment was just another jab in a long line of criticism she'd faced over the years. Nothing new, nothing worth fighting over. But William wasn't satisfied. His respect for Anne ran too deep. He reminded her of everything she'd sacrificed: holidays missed, endless tours, back-to-back engagements that rarely made headlines but quietly built the monarchy's reputation. To him, letting Laura's words go unanswered felt like dishonoring all of that. Anne appreciated his loyalty. She always had. but she urged caution. She knew from experience that reacting to careless remarks only gave them more power. William, though, saw things differently. He'd grown up watching how quickly rumors spread, how one whisper could explode into a full-blown scandal by morning. If Laura's comment leaked to the press, it could be twisted into a story about generational conflict within the royal family. And that was a narrative he wasn't willing to risk. By now, word of the tension had reached Camilla, and she wasn't happy. Laura had always been off-limits for public criticism. She wasn't a working royal. She didn't ask for this life. And Camilla had worked hard to keep her and Tom shielded from palace politics. But now, her daughter was being dragged into the mess anyway, and Camilla bristled at the idea that William was overreacting. This put King Charles in an impossible position. As king, he needed to keep the family united. But as a father and husband, he understood Camilla's protective instincts. He'd worked hard to bring his second family into the fold quietly, making sure Laura and Tom were accepted, even if titles would never be theirs. Now, one remark threatened to undo all of that careful balance. Charles tried to mediate. He invited William to Windsor Castle for tea, praising his loyalty to Anne, but urging him to consider whether pushing the issue would only deepen family divisions. William listened respectfully, but his jaw stayed tight. He wasn't convinced that staying silent was the right move. Meanwhile, Laura stood her ground. She felt misunderstood, unfairly judged. Her life had always been carefully kept outside the royal spotlight. Yet somehow, she was now caught in its politics. At exhibitions and cultural events, whispers about her tension with William began to circulate. Friends asked delicate questions, and while she brushed them off, the embarrassment was impossible to ignore. The meeting that changed nothing. Charles knew this couldn't continue. The tension was growing, not fading, so he called for a private family meeting at Buckingham Palace, away from cameras, away from staff, just family. The goal was simple: address the issue before it spiraled further out of control. They gathered in a small drawing room. William, Anne, Camilla, Laura, and Catherine, who came along hoping to calm things down. Charles started carefully. He reminded everyone that unity was the family's greatest strength, that maintaining it meant addressing tension before it caused real damage. He spoke about the monarchy's fragile position in modern Britain, how even private conflicts could hurt public confidence if they leaked. William spoke first. His voice was firm. He stated clearly that Laura's remark had crossed a line. He talked about Anne's decades of tireless work, about how much he admired her, about why her example mattered so much to him. Everyone in the room felt the weight of his words. There was no anger in his tone, just conviction. Laura didn't back down. She insisted she hadn't meant to offend anyone, that her words were blown out of proportion, that she'd been speaking casually, not aiming for a personal attack. To her, it was baffling that one remark could cause so much drama. Anne stepped in, trying to restore balance. She acknowledged the comment stung, but urged everyone to keep things from escalating further. Her voice stayed steady. But even her calm presence couldn't fully erase the tension. Camilla finally spoke, her voice sharp with frustration. She reminded William that her children had stayed away from public roles to avoid exactly this kind of scrutiny. That dragging Laura into palace disputes was unfair, that Laura had her own life and career outside the monarchy. But William didn't budge. He insisted that once words were spoken within the family, they carried weight, titles or no titles. The meeting ended without resolution. Charles urged calm, but he couldn't force agreement. Anne left quietly, returning to her work as always. William departed, still dissatisfied. Laura and Camilla left feeling defensive, convinced Laura had been unfairly targeted. What remained was a divide, subtle but undeniable. To the public, everything looked fine, but behind palace walls, trust had frayed. For William, this was about principle. For Camilla and Laura, it was about protecting their family's dignity. For Anne, it was another burden she carried silently. the divide that won't heal. Weeks passed. The disagreement didn't fade. It grew into an unspoken barrier at every family gathering. On the surface, everything looked polished. Smiles for cameras, firm handshakes, speeches delivered with practiced ease. But beneath that veneer, the tension lingered. Everyone in the household could feel it. William couldn't shake the feeling that Anne had been treated unfairly. His admiration for her went beyond loyalty. He saw her as the true embodiment of duty. Anne's decades of service, carried out quietly without craving attention, had always impressed him. Dismissing her efforts with a careless remark wasn't just rude, it was an insult to everything the monarchy represented. Anne tried to move on. She kept up with her engagements, met with charities, spent peaceful hours with her horses. If she felt the sting of Laura's words, she didn't show it. But those who knew her best noticed subtle signs. A firmer set to her jaw, a shorter tone in private conversations, a tendency to leave gatherings earlier than usual. Laura stood her ground, convinced she'd been misunderstood and unfairly judged. Her life had always been kept outside the royal spotlight, yet somehow she was now caught in its politics. At exhibitions and cultural events, whispers about her tension with William began circulating. Friends asked questions, and while she brushed them off, the awkwardness was hard to ignore. Camilla grew more protective. As queen consort, she'd worked hard to find her place within the royal structure, balancing her public role with loyalty to her children. Seeing Laura caught in this storm triggered a fierce instinct to shield her daughter. She often confided in Charles, reminding him that Laura and Tom had never asked to be part of palace politics. Charles listened carefully, but he also understood William's point of view. He knew how much Anne meant to his son, why William felt compelled to defend her. This left Charles in a tricky position, trying to keep the family from tearing itself apart. Catherine stepped in, trying to help. She invited Laura to gallery viewings and charity dinners, creating moments where reconciliation could happen. Anne agreed to attend events where Laura would be present, showing no outward sign of hurt, but beneath the surface, the lines had been drawn. William's cool distance toward Laura lingered, and her pride kept her from giving the acknowledgement he wanted. The public remained unaware. They saw the royal family carrying out duties, presenting a united front, but palace staff knew the truth. Seating charts were carefully plotted, schedules subtly tweaked, briefings meticulously planned to prevent clashes. The bigger question lingered. If Laura's remark could stir such a reaction, what did it reveal about the fragile ties holding the family together? William's anger made clear how fiercely he protected Anne. Camilla's defense of Laura highlighted the challenges of blending two families into one. For Anne, it was another chapter in a life defined by service and endurance. In the end, there was no grand resolution. No public apologies, no dramatic reconciliations. Just tension simmering beneath the surface. The situation settled into an uneasy truce. William stayed close to Anne, guarding her with fierce loyalty. Laura kept focusing on her art career, steering clear of family politics. But she knew her relationship with William would never be fully repaired. Camilla stayed protective. Charles remained the careful peacemaker, and Anne carried on as she always did, steady, composed, unshakable. What began as a passing remark had grown into something much larger, not because of the words themselves, but because of what they symbolized: respect, loyalty, pride, and the delicate balance of a family always under the world's watchful eye. The cameras never caught the tension, but those inside the palace knew. One evening's comment had left a mark that wouldn't easily fade. The royal family might look united from the outside, but on the inside, cracks were showing, and no amount of polished photos could hide them forever. So what do you think? Was William right to stand his ground? Or should he have let it go like Anne suggested? This story proves that even behind palace walls, family drama is just as messy as anywhere else. And when respect gets thrown out the window, Even royals can't ignore it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us whose side you're on. And if you want more inside stories about what really happens behind those palace doors, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Like, share, and check out the next video on your screen, because this royal drama is far from finished.